Maddie, to talk about your research and the award. Congratulations. Well, I guess in general, before we even dive in, just a little bit about you and how you got to where you are today. I mean, how did you end up doing research in SE?
So I actually had like a fun intersection of journeys. When I started my doc program, I also started the SE curriculum. So my doc program was 3 years, and the SE curriculum was about that. And they overlapped pretty nicely. So I think I was able to I had a really good outlet lined up for my thinking already, and was able to kind of plug it to combine how I experienced the training, as well as like other research with my own research agenda. So yeah, it's kind of how they overlapped.
What drew you to SC? Why did you sign up to do the SC training? What was that? What was appealing about that for you?
Yeah, I am in my master's program. So I've got a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. And while I was seeing clients in my internship years, I consulted with somebody who practiced SC, and there's not many people in my area. I'm in kind of the triad area of North Carolina. I'm in Greensboro, and I consulted with somebody who had training, and I tried kind of their suggestion to do a bit of movement before for a trauma narrative with a client. I was following a CBT protocol, and it worked quicker than what I had been anticipating I'm just, counseling can be such a labor of love and also longevity. And this was much different. So I got really interested in the suggestion, wanting to know more about kind of the nervous system. And so I graduated with my doctorate degree in counseling and counselor education from UNC Greensboro. And part of the structure of the program is to kind of have like a cognate or a minor, general study as well as like a specific area of focus. And I kind of just was able to build my area of focus. Sometimes there's preset courses, so maybe in public health. And so you get to learn the lingo to talk across disciplines with people. And I was able to build mine around stress physiology and use part of the SE curriculum to count as some of my cognate, and then take a few other classes in like human growth and development and different departments on campus to build that. But that's kind of how they plugged at the time for me.
Now, had you heard of SC prior to having that exposure in your master's program, or was that the first time you'd ever heard of it or seen it?
Yeah, that was the first time, really. I mean, our program was atheoretical, so pretty generalist with or integrative theories. So it was a consultation with somebody my site supervisor knew. So it was someone out in the community, Rachel Hutto, and she just gave me just a quick, it was really just a quick consult. And that was enough to kind of, I think, pique my interest of and that was towards the end of my master's program.
Okay.
And so kind of wanting more knowledge about that, but being done enough to get licensed. So, so I really grew in my understanding of it post, when I pursued licensure and then was working on the doc degree.
Was research something that was like top of mind for you? I want to do research, or was that something that was more like an obligation as part of the program and I've got to pick something to do research? How were you on that? Everyone's on a different point with that.
Yeah, I think a little bit of both. I think, signing up for or, applying to the doc program, I knew research would be a part of that. I knew counselor education is part of that. I knew that supervising would be part of that. So it would kind of add to, I strongly identify as a clinician, and that I find a lot of meaning in that role. And so kind of wanted to see what it would feel like to work with people in these other spaces. So I knew research would be a part of my work. I didn't really know where I'd land, but I guess that's true for most people, right? And then I think when I did a bit deeper of a dive, noticing what, just kind of thinking about holes that I was seeing or things that I was curious about that I kept asking people, and it was kind of like, great question. And so that told me I had a question to investigate, I guess.
Well, and so when you moved into the actual research process and you were thinking about what you wanted to do and how you wanted to do it, can you kind of give me a little bit of background on how did you get into where you ended up with your research?
Yeah. With a lot of strife, but a labor of love as well.
And it
Um,
strife, what
I mean, I found most of my research process quite frustrating, but I mean, kind of equally frustrating and equally exciting. And kind of still, I mean, the curiosity is what motivated me, I think, at every point, but I felt like I hit a lot of roadblocks, mostly in that the research as I was finding was very anecdotal or conceptual. And, here in the SE like curriculum, it's very applied, but also from my experience, it felt like this isn't a criticism, more of an observation, just a little bit of guesswork, and you need longevity in how you attune your senses to track these things.
Mhm.
But theoretically, it should be quite measurable. And so I think I felt frustration of, how is there, we have all this conceptual stuff, and then these training models that are supporting the idea that, you know, autonomic regulation can be tracked and intervened with effectively, and clients could spend less time in therapy and more time in social engagement and fulfilling their life. But it was quite hard to measure. And so I kind of, most weeks, I think I said, I get why this hasn't happened yet. And I I almost wish I hadn't turned the page, but I'm glad I did.
Open that lid and, oh boy, here
Yeah.
we go.
Yeah, I think at every point I was like, I get it. Okay, I get it. Like, I understand why this hasn't happened yet. And honestly, if I hadn't been in a doc program that was kind of like I had to finish it, I don't know how or if I would. Um, but that was nice to just kind
Mhm.
of push through. I think the other challenge for me was that my committee was wonderful. My chair, Diane Borders, was, I mean, she's incredible. And this is not her research. Nobody at my department
I was gonna
really
ask
had
about
a
that.
lot of extensive training in trauma counseling in general, but also in physiology or stress physiology or neurobiology. Like, so those were not specialties with anybody in my department. And
Mhm.
so I was almost kind of sharing what I learned from trainings and literature and research with them, and they guided me in the strong research. They kind of just let me be creative, which was nice. It really was a lot of asking of, what if I did it this way? And like, I don't know how you would, but I guess.
Mhm.
And so that was a challenge. Like, it versus if I had had somebody, maybe a mentor in that space, well trained in this area, could have made the overlap a bit different.
Mhm.
But it was
Mhm.
still I had a lot of support, and I think I can take more ownership, which I'm grateful for.
What was it that was lacking in the literature that said, we should be able to do that, but we're not. Therefore, I
Yeah,
need to move in
gotcha.
this direction.
I think that what I got to in the literature felt a bit more mechanic. I mean, harder science, like more, the types of research being done was a lot more. You're looking for reliability, you're looking for, things that will happen time and time again, like really consistency. And then the therapy world is kind of like, it all depends. And so I
Real
think
world.
that, yeah, the conflict was that it depends, but there also should be trends.
Ah,
um, and so can we find that with a bit more certainty versus like, you need to be doing this for 10 years before you're good at it, because your
gotcha.
clients, well, that's a long time for them to be suffering. um,
Yeah.
yeah. And so, and then I think when I put that with my understanding of Porges' polyvagal theory, and Deb Dana pulls in all of this, how to apply it. So I think conceptually the application was there, but I don't know, like, how can we really know, and then the SE curriculum is like, here are some things you might track, like you kind of looking at all of it, but the interpretation can take, or accurate interpretation could take a while. And it really felt like guesswork, which is
Mhm,
fine. I mean, there's really good value in that.
mhm,
But I think that what, from my understanding of polyvagal theory, is that a lot of counseling theories, so non-somatic and somatic, well, really non-somatic, but they rely on clients to be in a state of social engagement to benefit from cognitive and relational processes, and use the therapeutic relationship, like that's an agent of change, and let's make a narrative, or let's look for insight, and so we make the assumption that clients come to us in a state of social engagement. But
mm,
from how I was understanding polyvagal theory, if we miss that, they're going to be in counseling for a long time, right? Like if they're actually in like a dorsal freeze or fight or flight, they're not benefiting from all the work I do in my therapeutic alliance, or they're not benefiting from the psychoed, right? I need to accurately intervene with them to pull them up into social engagement, to more accurately allow them to move through things.
mhm, mhm.
So I think it was like a little bit of that kind of motivated me, maybe.
It sort of sounds like, the idea of being able to meet the client where they're at and not
Mhm.
assume that there's someplace further along or different, not further along, but different, cognitively or social relationship wise, that
Mhm.
you have to be able to assess where they're at a fairly valid, reliable level so that you can intervene or do what needs to be done that will maybe accelerate or at least not hinder the process. Am I
Mhm.
misinterpreting or is that
No, I think that's fair. Because I think, so that's what I found missing in the literature, is that at least in the counselor education realm, counseling literature, it's around, meet the client where they're at, like if they're struggling, join them in that. And then a somatic approach, or SC, brings in like, meet them where they are physiologically,
Mhm,
and then intervene at that level. But it's like, well, how do we know where they're at physiologically without making a lot of assumptions, or noticing trends over time, which is still valuable. I think from what I was reading, like it could be a bit more reliable sooner.
yeah, yeah, it
In
shouldn't take
theory.
yeah.
So that's what I looked at, I think.
It becomes a great indicator, at least it's a data point, it's a piece of information that allows you to
Mhm.
at least explore things further rather than just sort of hope that this is gonna work out after 5 years or something like that.
Mhm. And then SE comes in with how to intervene based on that, based on that assessment.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm,
so that is very valuable, but I kind of looked at, really, how do you know first what you're intervening
mhm, mhm.
with a bit of reliability.
Yeah,
And then the type of reliability I was looking for was tracking visual cues of autonomic regulation based on heart rate variability as a measure of autonomic regulation, and kind of the interplay of the sympathetic parasympathetic sides. And so how do we how do we know that animated hand movements and dilated pupils are actually corresponding with something that we can track, and our counselor is going to use that equipment in their sessions? Likely not.
mhm,
and
mhm,
and so there was a lot of data around tracking those, like heart rate variability is a measure I used. So tracking that, but with not in counseling sessions, so not
mhm.
with clients, but with people who watched an activating video clip, or were on the treadmill for a bit. So like those processes had been measured, but maybe not in talk therapy.
What was frustrating, you said there was some strife and things like that. Was that mainly the lack of literature, the lack of uh, mentorship specific in this area, or was that something else as you were walking through your research process? And the reason I'm asking this is because part of what we want to do as a committee is start building mentoring relationships with
Mhm.
emerging researchers. What could
Mhm.
you have used that you didn't have at the time? And if it's just literature, that's one thing, but what was it that was missing? And I think you've touched on it, but I just want to confirm.
Mhm. Mentorship would be great, because I found myself trying to it seemed like there was a narrow overlap of people who practice SE and people who do solid research. Like, I mean,
Oh,
the amount of published research on SE is much less than in this specific area. So I felt like I was piecemealing things together.
mhm,
And I wasn't necessarily researching SE, but I find it could be quite applied
mhm,
for this type of therapy.
mhm,
So I could see this supplementing, but I think my larger question was more general. So I was pulling from what I could find on SE, um, and it was mostly anecdotal or conceptual, and which was the same for. And then the stuff on polyvagal theory or vagal regulation was very structured, and counseling sessions are not, and or not SE sessions, and then
mhm.
and so I think that was a hard place to find. So I think, yeah, having mentorship with people who are trained in research methods and stats, that was my hardest. That was the biggest haul, is to find out how, because I think I kind of just made up my own method, um, in terms of, like, I wasn't necessarily following a study design. I was just trying to answer my questions,
Mhm.
and that was challenging because I was kind of trying to follow measure development guidelines, but also everything depends. And so it didn't fit in what I was looking at. So
Mhm.
I think that the stats were very complex, and Bob Hinton at UNCG was a saint and not on my committee, but the head of the research department there, and really spent some time helping me. He would say, here's what the stats say, and I'd say, here's how we might interpret it. Like, but I really needed support on how to fit this into something statistical or empirical.
Overall, when you look forward with your research, and then I want to talk about the award itself, but um, where do you see this research having the biggest impact, or where would you like to see it have some impact? What's next for that research that you've done?
Mhm. I would love to rerun it, and just continue to validate it. So if
Mhm,
there's anybody in the SC community that wants to do that, or who I can join in, having more iterations of this to extend the validity or get more solid support rate, because I ran it, um, on at a college counseling training clinic, so college age students, so different populations would be really helpful.
mhm,
So I think I'd like to just continue, seeing if it really fits. How
mhm,
can we make it a bit more accessible, because it's for counselors. I mean, it should be quite applied.
mhm.
So I'm hoping that it's digestible too. And I think, of course, when I was finishing the study, it had a lot of ideas on what to do differently next time. So
Mhm.
I'd like for the next time to come to being. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and what compelled you, or what incented you to, apply for the Levine Award? What was your thinking around that? Let's talk more about the award side now. The excitement, hooray!
Yeah. Um, I think I saw it in a newsletter, or I just saw a bit of info about it. And while my study wasn't run for SE research, but I mean at the basics, I think I was trying to find something that was kind of like how I understood what underlied SE. And so I thought it could plug really well, or be helpful for at least people in the beginning year learning what to track. This could be really helpful for, people have a bit more clarity, maybe, versus like, more ambiguity. And curiosity is great, but I think we could have streamlined it. So I was hoping that it could actually be used and, to support people learning SE, in
Mhm,
particular. But I also, yeah, I mean, that's probably it. I mean, I saw the the call for submissions. and thought mine might be a stretch, but could fit well. And then I was like, if anybody's going to use this, these are the people. Like
Yeah.
if these are the students of SE I think this could be really valuable.
So the idea that it could be helpful to students or helpful to those in practice sounds like
Hmm.
a motivating factor for you.
And those teaching it, like
Mhm.
so my degree's in counselor education, so
Oh,
and in supervision. So, how do we work with beginning clinicians or people or SE students who are learning what to notice in session? How do we support them? And to me, support would come in a bit more structure. And so that's, I think, what I tried to do.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I need to put you together with someone literally on the phone this morning about, she's all about every session is a research session. And
Yeah, cool.
you need to be able to observe and
Mm-hmm.
learn and adjust. And it sounds like that your research could help people in that mode, just get another level of input, another level of insight into what's going on with with the client.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that the way you worded that made me remember a support in that my chair was quite interested in learning processes and pedagogy because
Ah,
she is an expert researcher in the field of clinical supervision.
mm,
And so she really disliked the idea of, it's your intuition, follow your intuition. She was like, how do I teach intuition to people?
oh,
And I think
mm,
that her question with my experience in the SE training, because I love intuition and I like, making decisions based on my gut, but I think she was, in terms of how you teach that, I think there could be more clarity. And she really helped me build that question, I think, of like, yeah, that it is your gut, but it's all, and maybe it's your Vegas down there, but it's also could be a bit more structured and be more supportive and reliable, like more
mm-hmm,
accurate.
mm-hmm.
That made me think of that. So yes.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, that's very neat. And were there any concerns, or I realize COVID was a key hiccup that none of us would have expected, but any hesitancy to apply or any concerns about applying that, you know,
No, I think what pulled me into was I was not expecting to win by any means, but there was also a blurb about we might get support with publication. So like just having a review by people who know this stuff well, right? Because my committee they were sound on the research methods. They helped me with that, but I'm not sure if the SE people or the people who would use this the most feel like it's important.
oh, yeah.
And so to have it read by people like experts and then perhaps support with taking it further was really what stood out to me. So I was like, it's worth a shot at least.
Mhm, yeah. Well, if only for the feedback and the, yeah, support. Oh, good. That's good because that's something that's important. And I think that's,
Yeah.
the whole idea is to start building that energy around research and supporting people that
Mm-hmm.
are new in it. So good, good. I'm glad to hear that. Well, what did you think when you got the email from Michael that you won?
I was overjoyed. I think I started shaking.
Oh,
I mean, I just had a lot of energy. I think I pulled up my email in between some client sessions because I work as a full-time contract therapist. And then I teach adjunct. So it was kind of in between some things that day. And I really, I mean, I kind of cried. It felt really validating. And I think it came at a nice time because I'd just gotten a manuscript rejection. um, and I was like, this isn't important to anyone.
oh,
Like,
I don't know. Yeah.
and then I got the email and I was like, no, the people who get it, they're gonna get it. And it felt really affirming. And I think, the way I've been talking to friends and family, I think this will be a resource that I can feel in my body for a while. So I'm really great. It felt very validating.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, people were very enthused about it. So I think you should feel validated. people were really impressed with your work. So that was
Oh,
cool.
thank you.
So, who did you tell first?
I told my partner, my husband, and then I told my family, and I don't know if you've experienced this or other people in higher ed. It's like my family doesn't really understand. They like love me dearly and kind of just see me going through these cycles. But so I sent a screenshot of the email and I said, "This is really important to me," like to let them know that I was expecting excitement. And I was like, "This is a thing that matters a lot to me," like, and I'm really excited. And they were like, "Oh, great, yeah." But if I just sent them the thing, they'd been like, okay.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah, so I did a little coaching. I was like, I'm demanding enthusiasm from my support. Thank you. Yeah, and then I told some close friends. I've got a group of friends from my Atlanta training cohort, which is where I did beginning and intermediate years in SE, and told them, and I was like, they'll get it. They'll know.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I told my chair, and she
Oh.
was really excited as well.
Oh, that's neat. What do you think, how is it going to change, if at all, um, you know, your path? What's the impact going to be on you professionally, 2 years from now? I mean, I know that's a long stretch, but
Mm-hmm. I think really the affirmation is going to motivate me a bit, because I think that the whole process was very arduous, and I was very glad to be done, and have taken some time to kind of just like decompress from the amount of stress I put my own system through, right? And kind of just last year and just really trying to lengthen and rest. And I think that and I've had about a year of that. So I defended this time last year, and
oh Lord,
and this feels really nice to just like, I had a lot of space from it, and then I got some valuable feedback, and feels motivating. I hope I can connect or network with people who might be interested in or helping me know where to plug this next. I think is because I adjunct teach, but I'm not affiliated with a particular department at the moment, and so conducting research would probably happen later on for me, if I do full-time higher ed, which I don't know that I will, because I love doing clinical work. Yeah, so I'm hoping for networking.
Yeah,
and
okay.
really just like the how and what next. I think I've got my ideas. I just don't know exactly the resources that I could tap.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of options too, which make it, I think sometimes problems of abundance can still be stressful.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of options. So, and in your clinical practice, how do you think it's going to affect that much at all, or is that something that you sort of treat as a separate area?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that I show up with clients quite curious, and I really am trying to fine tune how I'm tracking them and how I'm using SE with them. But they also really like, I mean, the clients I've worked with, they really like knowing the why. And I think that, my identity as an educator too falls in nicely with that, of like, here's what your system might be up to. And like, how can we support it? Does it need to upregulate or downregulate? Like, what do you think? And having them kind of just feel like very informed about their process, I think is empowering for them. So I definitely see the overlap. I don't think they'd really understand much, or not they'd understand, but I don't know that they'd love to read research articles. But I think the applied piece is what I'm excited about. That it's not theoretical or conceptual, or it doesn't have to be.
Researcher, clinician, educator. The ability to integrate all of those together is very gratifying. And it's hard though. It's hard because the intersections aren't always clear. And it sounds like your research creates at least maybe a wormhole in between the different universes.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's like, it's research for, I'm really interested in applied research. So I think I love being very existential and kind of philosophical, and I really enjoy that. But I think when working with clients, sometimes they're just, the tangible pain they're in doesn't want me to be spinning my wheels around, too much of these bigger questions until we can get just a bit more regulation online, and then we can benefit from the deeper dives. But I think application at first feels most helpful right now.
And you feel like this research will help you get to that point?
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. Do you think in general the SC community, this award is meaningful or will be impactful today or down the road? What's the position of this award, do you think, in the larger SC context?
I guess I don't know enough. I think I still, the way from whether this is accurate or not,
no, that's okay.
like
No, perception.
from my outside perspective looking in, I don't know how many people are doing research that's being published. So I mean, I've definitely combed through what I can find, and so to those people I think this will matter, and for the practitioner, I think they want something they can use. So if we can do applied versus conceptual research, I think that will bridge a bit of the interest of like, this is not that everything has to have like a clear utility, but I think it could be supportive. But I also think a lot of people who practice SE, it doesn't really, it depends is totally fine, right? Like that there can be a slowness and there's a real gentleness to the work. And so it doesn't have to be mechanized. But I think that in terms of maybe helping people feel more confident in their SE, of like, oh, I have more confidence because I know what to track. And I have this measure to support me in learning trends and reliably intervening, versus if I misread something and I think my intervention fails, I'm going to be less likely as a counselor to try it again. I'll feel, imposter syndrome or whatever. And so I think that this could help people feel a bit more affirmed in listening to, or kind of, like training their intuition into a place that will feel effective. And then maybe a lot more people will use it. And I think that's the other thing is, like, unfortunately, maybe other communities outside of SE doesn't, because it's not as empirical, it's not, the value seems less, which is unfortunate. And I obviously don't think that, but even just the recent stuff with the credentialing, I mean, the continuing ed hours being challenged. So it's like, but this is a reliable method. And so I think that, if more research is done, there's more buy-in, there's more training, there's more resources for people to learn it, maybe in their training programs.
So it sounds like it has a lot of practical utility within the context of the clinical, interaction, but also it could have a larger, the award, just kind of visibility, creating a stimulus or catalyst for the research that needs to create legitimacy for SC as a whole. Is that overstepping?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that feels right. Like, I think that if because I think that SE practitioners, they're curious and they have questions, and so if they connect with the people doing research, then we get some more support, or we get to fine tune how we intervene with more efficacy. But I think ultimately, like I hope the award continues to be very client focused. Because I think that's what we're in the business of, is supporting clients. And so if this is a skill that somebody has where they can think critically and push through like some barriers and just to put this part of their brain to use to help their clients, like that'd be really cool to inspire.
I guess I'm going to close out by just a general question of any words of advice or things that you want to share with people that are maybe just starting the research journey as a master's or doctoral student, and are wondering if this is going to be the path that they should go on. What kinds of things would you tell yourself 2 years ago?
That's a good question. I think maybe just like believe that you know enough to start, that you probably can see the roadblocks, and there's going to be more that you didn't see from a distance that you'll see up close, but it's not been like there. I think that a lot of this research hasn't been done before, and that's kind of exciting, that kind of like, anything could stick,
Oh, yeah.
not anything, but like good ideas and like creative thinking, that's how you fill the gap. And so enough to start, and then just see where things unfold. I did find the process, well, I think the dissertation process in general is a bit isolating, but supporting each other in this kind of research could be really fulfilling too. Like, get some good co-regulation going on how you're excited about research. But yeah, I think just starting, and continuing to ask questions will be, and to me, it was very motivated by my client work. So if there's something that stands out to them in their clinical practice, that could be a great starting point.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, and I think too, as sort of a renegade, or I sort of was the outlier in my PhD program. I didn't fit the mold, and a lot of people didn't know what the heck I was doing. And to have other people that are sort of in that mode, I mean, because it does feel isolating. Sometimes it's
Yeah,
like, really, am I even on the right track here? Because I just feel like I'm, not even in
right.
the same ballpark as these people. That can be
Yeah.
very scary and demotivating some days.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. I felt that often. Um, but I mean, always really gratifying, because I think the people I met who were like at trainings or different things like that, they were excited about the research. They're like, oh, cool, like we'd like to use that.
Oh,
And that
really?
felt really nice. Yeah.
Oh, cool. So
Um,
you shared it with people, or talked about it with your peers, and they were supportive?
yeah, I was writing chapter 5, which I mean, my kind of discussion and wrap up while I was at my sorry, I've got a black cat who's
Oh, mine's
everywhere.
sitting outside the door hollering, so I get it.
I
Don't worry.
thought it would, yeah, I thought he was going to sleep right through it. He did not. I was writing chapter 5 while I think I turned in chapter 5 the week after I finished advanced 1.
Oh,
Um,
goodness.
yes. And I took that with Lael Keen and Abby Blakesley. And so that was actually I felt like it was very easy to write, because I was spending a lot of time
Ah,
like I was filtering everything we learned through how do I make sense of my study. So I got a lot of benefit out of their instruction, but talking to people on breaks and that's the stuff my nervous system was going through when I met them. A lot of different people, and they're like, that'll be really cool, like we'd like that, like we would like to see what that is. And I've had a few people ask me for it, and I'd love to. It feels like it's not sound enough to share, but I don't know. I think I'm still, that's where I definitely feel like I hope this is kind of like a launching point, for me to have a bit more momentum with it.
any other final thoughts or anything on the award or your research or the future that you want to share?
All big questions. No, I mean, I feel really grateful. I feel really excited. I'm glad that the Institute is focusing on research, and that research can have a little home in the SE community. And I'd love for that to grow for sure. So I feel just really grateful, and it's meant a lot to just have, I mean, nobody reads a dissertation like your committee and my partner, he's read it. That's about it. So it felt nice to also have some other people hear my thoughts. So I'm really just grateful for that.
Neat, neat. Well, many, many, many thanks and
Yes.
congratulations.